Rosa Marquez stood at the frayed edge of the city's industrial wasteland, where the polluted river coiled like a serpent's regret beneath the old railway bridge. The August evening air hung heavy, laced with the acrid tang of oil and decay, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised hues of violet and ash. She pulled her worn coat tighter, the fabric a thin barrier against the chill that seeped deeper than bone into the hollow where her brother's memory lingered. His laugh now a ghost in the wind, silenced by addiction's cruel grip 2 years past. Why this pull tonight? She wondered, her thoughts a tangled undercurrent, the rumor of a guardian dog among the homeless whispering through her like a half-forgotten dream. It was folly, perhaps, another futile reach into the void of her work, where compassion warred with exhaustion. Yet her feet moved forward, drawn by an invisible thread. In the distance, a low, mournful howl sliced the twilight raw and resonant, echoing her own unspoken ache. It came from the shadows under the bridge, a call that stirred something dormant in her chest, a flicker of curiosity amid the numbness hinting at a collision she couldn't yet fathom. The railway bridge loomed overhead, like the skeletal remains of a forgotten colossus, its iron girders etched with rust and graffiti groaning faintly as a distant train rumbled past, sending vibrations through the damp earth. Below the encampment sprawled in chaotic defiance, a patchwork of tattered tents and blue tarps lashed to concrete pillars, flickering campfires casting erratic shadows that danced like uneasy spirits across the mud-slicked ground. The river slugged along nearby its surface, oily and iridescent under the sodium glow of street lamps, exhaling a fetid stench of sewage and stagnation that clung to Rosa's throat like regret. Whispers rippled through the huddled figures wrapped in threadbare blankets. Tales of a dog, battle-worn and vigilant, who patrolled the night, warding off intruders with a growl that spoke of old wars. But amid the murmurs, darker signs emerged, fresh gang tags slashed across the pillars in crimson spray paint symbols of territorial menace that gleamed wetly in the dim light, like wounds not yet scarred over. A discarded syringe crunched under Rosa's boot, and she froze, her pulse quickening. The air thrummed with an undercurrent of peril, the kind that hid in alleyways and unspoken glances. Something shifted in the gloom, a rustle of fabric, or perhaps eyes watching from the tent flaps, amplifying the isolation, the bridge's arches framing a world where safety was an illusion, and threat lurked in every unlit corner, mirroring the shadows in her own heart. Rosa's flashlight beam trembled as she wove deeper into the encampment, slicing through the murk like a hesitant confession, illuminating faces etched with the city's relentless toll eyes, hollowed by hunger skin weathered like cracked pavement. Her mind fractured under the weight of it all. Fragments of her brother's face flashing unbidden, his grin fading into the pallor of overdose. The empty apartment she'd cleared out alone, boxing up dreams that smelled of stale smoke and unwashed regret. Why am I here? The question looped in her thoughts, a silent mantra of doubt, her steps faltering as if the mud clutched at her boots with accusatory fingers. She gripped the flashlight tighter knuckles, whitening a futile anchor against the rising tide of numbness that had become her armor, compassion doled out in measured doses, lest it consume her like it had him. No tears came. They dried up long ago, leaving only this paralyzed hush inside a void where hope used to echo. She paused at a tent flap, hand hovering the fabric rough under her fingertips, evoking the hospital sheet she'd clutched during his final hours. A soft whimper escaped her lips unbidden, as the encampment's quiet despair mirrored her own isolated souls adrift, just like her teetering on the brink of surrender. Yet something deeper stirred, a faint rebellion against the freeze, urging her onward into the shadows where vulnerability lurked like a predator. Her breath came shallow, chest tight with the unspoken fear. If she reached out now, would she shatter completely, or find a thread to pull herself back from the edge? The air thickened, charged with an unseen presence, as Rosa's gaze swept the underbelly of the bridge, where shadows pooled like spilled ink. A low growl rumbled from the gloom, not aggressive, but resonant, vibrating through her bones like a warning wrapped in velvet. There, half concealed behind a concrete pillar, a silhouette materialized. Ghost the German shepherd, his form etched in the firelight, ears pricked, coat patchy and scarred like a map of forgotten battles, eyes gleaming with a wary intelligence that pierced straight through her defenses. He didn't advance, just watched, his limp posture a silent testament to endurance, those amber orbs holding hers for a heartbeat too long, as if measuring the fractures in her soul. Rosa's pulse stuttered, a fleeting connection sparking in the void, a promise perhaps of upheaval disguised as alliance. A homeless man nearby leaned in, his voice a gravelly murmur. "That dog's trouble's shadow. Best leave before it claims you too." She nodded, turning away, but the weight of Ghost's stare lingered on her back, like a hand not yet extended, whispering of fates entwined in the night's embrace. Rosa's mind drifted back as she drove away from the bridge, the city's neon haze blurring into streaks like tears on a windowpane, pulling her into the vortex of memory, where her brother Miguel still lived in vivid, aching color. 2 years ago, he'd been the spark in their family, tall and laughing with hands that could fix anything from a busted carburetor to a broken heart, his voice booming through their cramped apartment during Sunday dinners, plates clattering with arroz con pollo and stories spun like gold. But addiction had crept in like fog off the river, first a whisper in the form of pills for a back injury from the warehouse job, then a roar that swallowed him whole, his eyes turning distant, his frame wasting away until he was a shadow of the man who'd once carried her on his shoulders through summer festivals. Rosa had fought it with everything rehab stints paid, from her meager savings, late-night drives, to pull him from alleyways reeking of despair, her pleas echoing hollow in the sterile glow of emergency rooms. Rosa's apartment was a fortress of quiet isolation walls, painted in neutral grays that absorbed light like her heart, absorbed sorrow, the air stale with the scent of instant coffee and untouched takeout containers stacked on the counter like forgotten promises. Each morning blurred into the next alarm buzzing at dawn, a mechanical rise from sheets tangled in restless dreams, her reflection in the mirror a stranger with shadowed eyes that avoided their own gaze, fearing the emptiness staring back. She'd brew coffee black and bitter, sipping it while scrolling through case files on her laptop, names and tragedies blending into a monotonous scroll, addicts, runaways, the city's discarded souls mirroring her brother's fate, each one a prick against her numb defenses. Work consumed the day, shelter visits where fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped insects, conversations laced with practiced empathy that felt increasingly hollow, her voice steady, but her thoughts drifting to what-ifs about Miguel. Ghost, huddled in the damp crevice beneath the railway bridge, his patchy coat matted with the grime of endless nights, each scar a jagged testament to a life fractured by human hands. His breath came in shallow huffs, the limp in his right hind leg, a constant throb like a forgotten nail, driven deep, a relic from the day his world shattered. Once he'd been shadow badge number etched on a collar that gleamed under precinct lights. A police K-9 unit star trained in the crisp dawn hours of a suburban training ground, where commands were sharp as whistles and rewards tasted of liver treats warm from a handler's pocket. His senses had been honed to perfection, nose slicing through chaos to sniff out narcotics hidden in car panels, ears perking at the faintest rustle of a suspect's flight, his bark a thunder that commanded respect. But betrayal had come cloaked in familiarity. His handler, a man named Reyes with calloused hands that once scratched behind his ears, succumbing to greed, stealing Ghost during a midnight raid gone wrong, trading him to a gang for a cut of the spoils. The memories assaulted him in flashes, the van's metallic tang ropes biting into his muzzle as he was dragged from the kennel, Reyes's averted eyes gleaming with guilt under street lamp glow. Rosa returned to the bridge the next evening, compelled by an invisible tether, her footsteps echoing the hollow rhythm of her grief as she scanned the shadows for the scarred silhouette that had haunted her thoughts. Ghost watched from his perch atop a crumbling concrete slab, his amber gaze meeting hers across the encampment, a silent acknowledgement of kindred voids, both souls adrift in the wreckage of betrayal, their emptiness mirrored in the polluted river's sluggish flow. She saw in him the same guarded stance she wore, ribs faintly visible under patchy fur, like her own cheeks hollowed by sleepless nights, his limp a physical echo of her emotional stagger since Miguel's death. Ghost's instincts prickled at her approach, nose flaring to catch the scent of sorrow mingled with determination, much like his own mix of wariness and unspoken yearning for connection. Jax emerged briefly from his tent-wiry frame, tense eyes darting like ghosts did at every rustle, the boy's runaway fear paralleling the dog's abandonment, both clinging to the bridge as a fragile sanctuary. The sky cracked open like a dam, bursting with unspoken fury, unleashing a torrent of rain that hammered the railway bridge's rusted beams, turning the encampment into a sodden labyrinth of mud and despair. Rosa's flashlight cut through the deluge, its beam fracturing in the downpour as she pressed on, driven by the gnawing pull of the rumors, her coat clinging like a second skin heavy with regret. Thunder growled low, echoing the unrest in her chest, when suddenly from the shadows beneath a sagging tarp, a figure emerged, Jax the teen runaway, shivering violently, his wiry frame curled fetal against the cold concrete eyes, wide with a terror that smelled sharper than the river's rot. Beside him, Ghost materialized like a specter forged from the storm itself, the German shepherd's scarred body tensed in protective stance, fur plastered flat to reveal the map of old wounds, his amber eyes locked on a flickering silhouette in the distance, a hooded figure lingering at the encampment's edge, rain sluicing off them like accusations. Rosa froze at the edge of the storm-lashed clearing, rain streaming down her face like unshed tears. Her mind a battlefield where logic clashed with the raw tug of empathy, the sight of Jax's trembling form and Ghost's unyielding guard stirring echoes of Miguel's final pleas. "What am I doing?" she thought, internal monologue fracturing like the lightning above. "I'm not equipped for this. Not a cop, not a hero, just a woman patching holes in a sinking ship, her own grief, an anchor dragging her back from the brink." The hooded figure in the distance shifted a shadowy threat, amplifying her fear, whispering of dangers she couldn't control much, like the addiction that had stolen her brother, despite her every effort. Yet Ghost's eyes met hers again, amber depths, pleading without words, his body a shield for Jax mirroring the protection she'd failed to give Miguel, the subtle sign. A faint whine beneath his growl, tipping the scales, as compassion surged hot and insistent against the cold wall of self-preservation. Logic screamed, "Retreat, call authorities. Stay safe, don't get attached." But empathy countered fierce and unbidden. "They're like him, lost, hunted, needing someone to stand in the storm." Her hands clenched, knuckles white around the flashlight, the hesitation a palpable ache until Ghost's brief tail flick a vulnerable twitch amid his tension, shifted her mindset, a quiet revelation that caring, however terrifying, was the only path through the numbness. With a deep breath that tasted of rain and resolve, she stepped forward, the internal argument yielding to the pull of their shared fragility. Rain lashed like accusations from the heavens as Rosa surged forward, her voice cutting through the gale with a steadiness born of buried resolve. "Come with me now." Jax recoiled at first, his body a coiled spring of mistrust, eyes darting between her outstretched hand and the hooded shadow retreating into the storm's veil. But Ghost's nudge, a firm press of his wet muzzle against the boy's leg, propelled him upright, the dog's loyalty and unspoken command amid the chaos. The rescue unfolded in messy fragments. Jax stumbled on slick mud, cursing under his breath, his backpack snagging on a tent stake as thunder clapped like judgment. Rosa gripped his arm not too tight, her touch a tentative bridge over fear's chasm, while Ghost snapped at a sudden gust-whipped branch, teeth flashing white in the lightning's glare, his limp slowing him but not his determination. She led them to her car parked at the bridge's fringed doors, flung open like reluctant arms, the interior light a warm beacon in the deluge. Jax hesitated at the threshold, water pooling at his feet, his internal turmoil mirroring Rosa's own racing thoughts. This is irreversible, a leap into the unknown, like the night she dragged Miguel to rehab, only to lose him anyway. But Ghost leapt in first, shaking off rain in a spray that dotted the seats, his amber eyes meeting Rosa's with a flicker of acceptance sealing the shift. She slammed the door behind them, engine roaring to life, as the hooded figure vanished into the night, the act imperfect Jax, silent and tense Ghost, panting warily but real, a commitment forged in the storm's fury, pulling them from the brink into uncertain sanctuary. The apartment door clicked shut behind them like a vow whispered in the dark, sealing out the storm's rage as water dripped from their forms onto the worn linoleum, pooling like shed regrets. Rosa moved with deliberate slowness, flipping on a lamp that cast soft shadows across the barren room, her sanctuary of numbness now invaded by the raw vulnerability of strangers. Jack slumped against the wall, his wiry frame shivering, eyes downcast, as if the weight of his secrets pressed him low, while Ghost positioned himself by the door, body tense, ears swiveling at every creak of the old building, his scarred coat steaming in the warmth. She fetched towels first, draping one over Jax's shoulders without touching, respecting the invisible barriers, then knelt at a distance from Ghost, offering a bowl of water and a handful of kibble scavenged from her pantry, impulsive provisions. For a moment she'd never planned. Ghost's nose twitched, amber eyes locking onto hers in a gaze that pierced like a shared confession, his internal war palpable trust, or flee the betrayal of his past, a ghost haunting his hesitation. Slowly he lapped at the water tongue, flicking tentatively, a first fragile response that sent a warmth blooming in Rosa's chest, mirroring the thaw in her own frozen heart. Jack's murmured, then voice barely audible over the rain's patter on the window. His name's Ghost. He saved me once. The words hung like a thread, weaving them together. Rosa nodded her promise, forming silently. I'll keep you safe, both of you, a bond birthing in the quiet aftermath, messy with unspoken fears, but irreversible. The dog's hesitant eat a spark of healing amid the lingering shadows of doubt. As Ghost settled slightly, his body uncoiling just enough to lie down, the room felt less empty, their mutual vulnerability a tentative foundation for what might mend them all. The apartment's air hung thick with unspoken barriers, a fragile truce etched in the dim light filtering through rain-streaked windows, where Jax paced like a shadow, reluctant to settle his footsteps, soft echoes of unrest. Ghost claimed the corner by the door, body coiled into a tight ball of fur and scars, his amber eyes slits of vigilance that tracked every movement, Rosa's careful steps to the kitchen, Jax's fidgeting hands twisting a frayed hoodie string, as if the world beyond these walls still whispered threats. No growls escaped him, but the low rumble in his chest vibrated faintly, a defensive hum that spoke volumes of betrayal's lingering grip, his ears twitching at the creak of floorboards like alarms in the silence. Rosa respected the chasm, placing bowls of food and water at a distance, her own movements deliberate and unintrusive, mirroring the guarded space she kept around her heart since Miguel's loss. Jax muttered, little curling on the couch with knees drawn up, his gaze flicking to Ghost for reassurance, the dog's presence a silent sentinel that neither boy nor woman dared breach yet. Hours stretched like taut wires, the trio existing in parallel orbits, Rosa at her desk, paperwork, a shield against vulnerability. Jax staring at the ceiling, thoughts a storm of hunted memories, Ghost unmoving, his breath steady but shallow, a statue of mistrust forged in abandonment's fire. A clock ticked in the kitchen, marking time's slow crawl, the space heavy with the scent of damp fur and instant noodles. No one initiating contact, the mutual silence a cocoon of safety amid the unknown. Ghost's tail remained still, not a wag, his body language, a clear boundary approach at peril, for trust was a luxury stolen long ago. Rosa's internal whisper echoed the sentiment. Don't push, let them come to you, like the patience she'd wished for with Miguel, now applied to these wounded souls. In this cold distance, the apartment felt like the bridge's underbelly, transplanted indoors, a guarded limbo where healing hovered just out of reach, waiting for the first crack in the armor. Morning light slanted through the blinds like hesitant fingers, illuminating the quiet tableau where Rosa knelt by Jax's side, dabbing antiseptic on a fresh cut along his forearm. A jagged line from the storm's chaos, red and angry, like the scars on her soul. Jax winced but held still, his breath hitching in rhythms that mirrored Ghost's watchful pants. From across the room, the dog's eyes fixed on the scene, body tense, as if ready to intervene. The air carried the sharp tang of ointment and the faint musk of wet dog, blending with the unspoken wounds. Each carried Rosa's grief, a dull throb in her chest, Jax's fear a knot in his gut from night's evading shadows, Ghost's betrayal a phantom ache in his limp. She worked in silence, her touch feather-light, respecting the boy's flinch, much like she'd learned to navigate Miguel's withdrawals, gentle, persistent without demand. Ghost observed from his corner, ears perked, his own scars itching under the fur, a silent kinship forming as he noted the parallels, the boy's vulnerability echoing his own stolen loyalty. Rosa's compassion, a distant echo of handlers long gone. When she finished wrapping the wound in gauze, Jax nodded faintly, a wordless thanks, and tossed a scrap of bandage toward Ghost, who sniffed it cautiously from afar, his nose wrinkling in recognition of shared suffering. Rosa offered food, then a bowl of scrambled eggs, divided 3 ways, placing Ghost's portion midway, not forcing proximity. The mug slipped from Rosa's fingers like a memory too heavy to hold, shattering on the tile floor with a crack that echoed through the apartment shards, scattering like fragments of her fractured past. The sound jolted her vision, blurring as flashbacks assaulted her senses. Miguel's laugh turning to a cough in their childhood kitchen coffee, spilling from his trembling hands during one of his rare sober mornings, the ceramic breaking then too, a harbinger of the losses to come. She knelt to gather the pieces, hands shaking the sharp edges, pricking her skin like accusations. Why couldn't you save him? The grief surged hot and unbidden, her breath catching in a silent sob. From the corner, Ghost's head lifted, ears perking at the noise, his own memories stirring the crack of a handler's whip in the dim warehouse where betrayal began, the shatter of trust, as Reyes abandoned him amid gunfire's chaos, scars itching anew under his fur. He barked once, sharp and unexpected, the sound slicing through Rosa's haze like a lifeline, pulling her back to the present, where Jax froze on the couch, eyes wide with mirrored alarm. Ghost didn't recoil. Instead, he paused, body still, but gaze steady on Rosa, a subtle shift in his posture, tail uncurling slightly, as if recognizing the echo of pain in her eyes. She met his stare the moment, a gentle tether, the broken mug forgotten, as emotional threads wove between them, a nod from Rosa, a soft whine from Ghost, acceptance blooming without fanfare. Jax edged closer, picking up a shard, his small gesture tying their wounds together. No words, just the quiet acknowledgement that brokenness could connect rather than divide. Ghost's pause, a bridge over the chasm of isolation. Sunlight filtered through the apartment's blinds like tentative promises, casting warm stripes across the floor, where Jax dangled a frayed sock from the couch, his movements hesitant at first, a playful test in the heavy air of guarded hearts. Ghost's ears perked, amber eyes locking on the makeshift toy, instincts warring between suspicion and the buried joy of his canine training days when fetch was command and reward intertwined. He lunged suddenly, paws skidding on the tile, jaws snapping gently at the sock in a burst of energy that surprised even him, tail wagging in erratic arcs like a flag of surrender to delight. Jax's laugh erupted, raw and unpolished, the sound foreign in the space that had known only silence and sorrow, his face cracking into a grin that softened the edges of his fear. Rosa paused in the kitchen, spoon hovering over a pot of soup, the warmth spreading through her chest like the steam rising, memories of Miguel's chuckles during impromptu games flickering, but this time without the sting, replaced by a spark of present hope. Twilight draped the apartment in soft indigo hues, shadows lengthening like exhaled breaths as Rosa sat on the floor back against the couch, her knees drawn up in a posture of quiet surrender, the day's weight pressing down like an unseen hand. Jax dozed nearby, his breathing, even for the first time, the boy's guarded edges softened by exhaustion. But Ghost, ever the sentinel, remained alert, his scarred form a silhouette in the dim light, amber eyes reflecting the flicker of a distant street lamp through the window. The air hummed with unspoken progress, the scent of shared meals lingering, when suddenly Ghost stirred, his limp barely noticeable, as he rose, paws padding silently across the worn carpet, each step a deliberate choice toward vulnerability. Rosa's breath caught her internal monologue, a whirlwind. He's coming to me, why now, after all the distance echoes of Miguel's rare moments of clarity stirring, but this felt different, pure, untainted by loss. Ghost paused inches away, nose twitching at her scent, then leaned in his head, resting heavily on her knee. Warm fur brushing skin in a gesture of profound surrender, his body relaxing against her as if shedding the armor of betrayal piece by piece. The apartment's fragile peace fractured subtly at dusk, the city outside humming with distant sirens like omens carried on the wind, as Ghost's ears suddenly pricked his body, tensing from relaxed sprawl to rigid alertness in a heartbeat. He paced the living room nose to the ground, then froze by the window, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest, not aggressive, but primal, echoing the instincts honed in police yards and sharpened by street survival. Rosa noticed first her coffee mug pausing mid-sip, the air thickening with unspoken tension as Ghost's posture shifted, hackles rising faintly tail low, and stiff eyes locked on the curtained glass where shadows danced from passing cars. Jack sat up on the couch, color draining from his face, his voice a whisper. "He does that when something's wrong." The environment morphed from sanctuary to subtle siege, the faint scent of rain mingling with the metallic tang of fear, Ghost's stillness a harbinger as he sniffed the air, sensing peril before human senses could grasp it. Perhaps the faint echo of exhaust from an idling vehicle below, or the whisper of footsteps in the hall. Flashbacks flickered in Ghost's mind. The warehouse betrayal Reyes's scent mingled with gunpowder, now resurfacing in phantom whiffs that made his limp, more pronounced body coiling like a spring. Rosa approached cautiously, hand extended, but Ghost didn't relax his growl, deepening at a shadow flitting across the blinds, foreshadowing the past's insidious return. The tension coiled tighter, primal and unspoken Ghost's instincts, a silent alarm that rippled through the room, stirring Jax's buried terror, and Rosa's grief echoes of trauma, weaving into the present like threads of a noose slowly tightening. A sharp knock echoed through the apartment like a gunshot from the past, shattering the tenuous calm and igniting Ghost's instincts into a blaze of fury, his growl escalating to a thunderous bark that reverberated off the walls, body lunging toward the door with hackles raised like spines of accusation. Jax bolted upright, face ashen, his hands trembling as he backed into the corner, the knock triggering a cascade of terror flashbacks to the gang's murder. He'd witnessed blood pooling on concrete, shouts muffled by night, the killer's face seared into his memory like a brand. "It's them!" he gasped, voice-cracking eyes wild with the maternal instinct of self-preservation, warped by fear, his body curling protectively as if shielding an invisible wound. Ghost positioned himself between Jax and the door, teeth bared in a snarl that exposed yellowed fangs, his protective aggression a raw outpouring rooted in his own trauma. The warehouse betrayal where Reyes had left him to die amid chaos, the scent of gun oil and deceit flooding back, making his limp a furious stagger. Rosa's heart hammered, her own emotions exploding in a torrent, shouting at the door to go away, while panic clawed at her throat, memories of Miguel's dealers pounding on their door, resurfacing the helplessness, a knife twist in her gut. The door rattled under a heavier blowwood, splintering faintly as the lock strained, and Rosa's blood turned to ice when a voice slithered through the crack, gravelly familiar in its menace. "I know you're in there, kid, and that mutt, too." Ghost's reaction was instantaneous, a feral explosion of recognition. Body slamming against the door, barks turning to roars that shook the frame, his amber eyes blazing with the fire of betrayed loyalty as he identified the intruder, Reyes, his former handler, now a gang enforcer, the man who'd stolen and abandoned him, scent unchanged, despite the years reeking of cheap cologne and corruption. Jax whimpered, collapsing to his knees, flashbacks assaulting him the night under the bridge where he'd seen Reyes execute a rival, the gun's flash illuminating the enforcer's scarred face, the same one now pressing against the peephole, demanding the witness and the dog that had thwarted a prior chase. Rosa flung open a drawer, grabbing a kitchen knife in trembling hands, her voice a shout through the barrier. "Leave or I'll call the cops." But Reyes laughed, a cold bark mirroring Ghost's fury, kicking the door again. "That dog's mine stolen property, and the kid saw too much hand 'em over, lady, or I'll burn this place down." Sirens wailed in the distance like a belated lament, their blue flashes piercing the apartment's blinds as Reyes' footsteps faded down the hall, leaving behind a door scarred with fresh gouges and an air thick with the acrid scent of fear sweat and dog breath. Rosa slumped against the wall, knife clattering to the floor, her body trembling in the quiet vacuum, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks as the adrenaline ebbed, exposing the raw edges of her grief, Miguel's ghost whispering failures in her ear. Jax emerged from behind the couch, knees wobbling, face streaked with dirt and dread, but he reached for Ghost first, burying his fingers in the dog's fur, the touch a anchor in the storm's wake. Ghost pressed back, body leaning heavily into the boy, his warmth a tangible promise of safety, tail thumping once in subdued rhythm. Amber eyes softening as he licked Jax's hand, the gesture sealing a bond reforged in crisis. Dawn broke gray and uneasy over the city, casting long shadows that seemed to stalk Rosa as she rifled through Ghost's old collar discarded in the corner like a relic from another life, her fingers brushing a hidden seam that split open to reveal a small flash drive, its surface etched with faint gang symbols, the stolen evidence Jax had whispered about in hushed tones. Ghost's instincts flared immediately, nose pressing against the device, a low whine escaping as he paced the room, ears swiveling toward the window where car lights flashed intermittently below, too deliberate to be coincidence. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now pulsed with subtle unease. Footsteps echoing faintly in the hallway, a phone ringing unanswered with unknown numbers, the air humming with the prickly scent of impending storm. Jax's face paled as he peered through the blinds, spotting a familiar hooded figure lingering across the street. Reyes's silhouette, unmistakable his presence, a noose tightening around their fragile peace. Ghost's body language shifted, hackles rising in waves, tail low, and stiff eyes darting to every creak and shadow, his limp accentuated by tension as he positioned himself between Jax and the door, a living shield attuned to dangers unseen. The underbelly of the railway bridge pulsed with malice as night swallowed the city. Reyes and his gang emerging from the shadows like specters summoned from Jax's nightmares, their forms silhouetted against the flickering campfires, faces twisted in predatory grins that gleamed under the sodium lamps. "Hand over the drive and the kid," Reyes' snarled voice, a gravelly echo of betrayal, his gun glinting coldly as he advanced, the air thickening with the metallic tang of impending violence and the river's fetid breath. Ghost's growl erupted into a ferocious bark body, coiling like a spring wound too tight, positioning himself before Jax and Rosa, his scars illuminated in stark relief by a flashlight's beam, the limp in his leg a defiant stagger amid the chaos. Jax clutched the flash drive, knuckles white, his breath ragged as flashbacks assaulted him, the murder's crimson spray, the same gun now aimed at his chest, his body trembling on the brink of collapse, the threat to his life, a noose tightening with each step Reyes took. Rosa's heart thundered internal monologue, a frantic plea. "Not like Miguel, I won't lose them too," her hand gripping a jagged piece of rebar from the ground, the confrontation unavoidable as gang members fanned out, encircling them under the bridge's groaning arches. Reyes lunged first, grabbing for Jax, but Ghost exploded forward, teeth sinking into the man's arm with a sickening crunch, blood blooming dark and hot, the dog's fury a whirlwind of fur and fangs protecting the boy as bullets whined past one, grazing Rosa's shoulder in a fiery kiss that drew a gasp of pain. The danger crystallized life or death in every heartbeat, Jax hyperventilating on the verge of fainting from terror. Ghost fighting despite his wounds, reopening blood matting his coat. Rosa swinging the rebar, connecting with a thug's knee in a crack that echoed her resolve. The river roared below like an accomplice, debris scattering in the melee, the standoff a cauldron of imminent loss, where one wrong move could end it all. Reyes's gun pressing against Ghost's flank, his finger tightening on the trigger, the explicit peril hanging like a blade over their throats, forcing the trio into a desperate huddle amid the encroaching doom.